Welcome to the All About You podcast. My name is Sheila and I am your host. In this podcast, I invite everyday people to tell their stories of their travels, passions, and what makes them happy. So if you have a story to tell, please contact me on allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com and let's tell your story. So now for today's conversation. Welcome to another conversation on the All About You podcast. And today I'm delighted to have William, and we are going to be talking about his experience of travelling within the pandemic. William, welcome to the All About You podcast.
Thank you for having me, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share the secrets of travelling during a pandemic.
Well, I'm really looking forward to this because the last time I stepped on an aeroplane was from Valencia to the UK in January 2020. So it's been a long time for me. So I'm really interested to hear your experiences.
Well, obviously you're not alone there.
No.
And I suppose the whole reason I'm on this podcast is I'm doing very unremarkable things, getting on a plane, meeting you whilst I'm here, but during a remarkable period, a global pandemic, where if we put it into context, no one I know has ever lived through one before.
No, me neither.
So it is an exceptional time, and so doing something as simple as travelling, even if it's short haul flights, it could be simply crossing a border as well. It doesn't even necessarily need to be via flying.
Mm-hmm.
That all of a sudden becomes more complicated.
Prior to the pandemic, did you used to travel quite a lot?
Relatively, yeah. I'm not a scratch map kind of chap. I wouldn't say my travelling resume is extensive. It's very humble compared to a lot of people, but that's not the point. It's not about how many places you've been or ticking things off. It's just about the experiences you have and what that means to you. So it's by the by how many places you've been to. But yes, I like to travel, always have. And actually, I've made it a point of travelling more during the last 2 years than actually I did before. And my travelling is more frequent now than it was before. And this is the point I'm trying to make is I think it should be, because it was taken away from us. And some people are still living under strict lockdowns and quarantines for reasons that, I don't need to go into. However, I feel it's very important to exercise the chance to travel, the chance to see people, go to new places, have different experiences, because I feel many people I speak to, including yourself, as you said at the beginning, their worlds have become smaller.
Definitely.
So that's not a good thing.
I mean, I think one of the things is we were taking travel very much for granted. When you look at the cost per kilometre or the cost per mile of air travel, it is incredibly cheap. When we think, you can go across the Atlantic quite cheaply when you look at the cost of the ticket and the mileage. I mean, I am talking about economy here. I'm not talking about business or first class. And obviously long distance as well, so long haul flights. So flying in general, as in cost per mile, is incredibly cheap. I mean, every time I fly, I'm just amazed at the miracle of flight in itself. So at the moment, a lot of people are not travelling because they're a bit worried they're going to get stranded in a country or the rules are going to change. But there are some incredible bargains for travelling if you are prepared to take whether it's a PCR test, whether it's you have to do confinement when you return back to your home country. But there are some incredible bargains out there.
I recently flew to Scandinavia and back for a tenner.
Really?
Yeah. Of course, you have to buy the COVID tests. That is the new reality. And it's not for me to tell people where they should travel or how they should travel. Again, as previously stated, it's down to the individual traveller. However, it's the reality of travelling during the last couple of years is different to maybe how it's portrayed, more widespread in the media or what have you. And like the panic that people talk about and the chaos, what I find is like every time a new variant is publicized, it becomes even more streamlined to travel. Like the airports get less and less busy, and that actually makes it ironically more safe. I'm certainly no anti-vaxxer or COVID denier. I'm fully microchipped. However, like I take on the personal risk. I understand the risk. We're all well educated. Nothing I do is illegal. Maybe there's been a few grey areas here and there, like earlier in the pandemic. However, yeah, the reason why you're interviewing me is because people just aren't taking the opportunities that are there, such as cheaper flights, or even just in the UK, crossing borders. People seem to be very hostile, but ultimately I feel like if you turn up somewhere and you want to spend your money for a local business, or if you want to support people, they're going to be welcoming.
Yeah, they'll welcome you with open arms. And I think it's a very valid point you made, going through airports. I've been watching people's experience of travelling during the COVID period or the pandemic, and these major airports that are like crazy are just empty. It's quite bizarre. And your experience when you travelled, do you find that the aircraft are 90% empty?
It's certainly not all beer and skittles, or it hasn't been. At the beginning of the pandemic, I mean, I was one of the people that was stuck in the queues at Gatwick, for hours. I had the good and the bad of it. However, moving forward, I do find that it's become so much more streamlined, and I'm not put off by having to fill in a passenger locator form. And yeah, like the aircraft are about 50% capacity, I'll say, most of the ones I get on over the last couple of months. I'm just not put off by it. It's just, we need to accept we are where we are. Travel was always a privilege. And so I just feel now is the time to sort of like really exercise that for different reasons. One, for the pandemic. Two, I don't want to be stuck in a negative mindset. I don't want to become more insular, inward looking. And three, I just feel I don't like being told what to do.
I mean, it's an interesting point, isn't it? Because you're talking at it from the passenger's point of view. But I was watching a video the other day, and it was talking about how the airlines are now trying to get back to normal. So crew are having to be retrained in service, in the protocols of serving food, serving drink, disinfecting the aircraft, this type of thing. So not only is it very different for passengers with the testing and the locator forms, it's also a huge learning curve for the airlines, because they've never really, I mean, there was a SARS thing quite some time ago, but this has been worldwide. Literally the whole world stopped with basically most forms of transport. So for the airlines as well, an awful lot of crew got laid off, and now they're being re-employed. And okay, this is the service we used to offer. This is now the service we're offering. So it's a big change for the passengers, and it's a big change for the airlines as well. What do you think is going to happen with the airline industry in general? Do you think it's going to take to, the middle of next year, we're all going to be piling back on planes as we did before, or do you think it's going to take longer?
I thought, before I started asking that question myself to many different people, I thought we would be back up and running already. However, again, the reason I'm here is because I'm the only person that's actually flown in to be where you and I both are now. Mm-hmm. Everyone else has come from internally from Spain. Yeah. And so I feel people are slightly fatigued. I thought there would be more urgency from within, where people are rushing to get away and travel. Mm. I mean, I think we saw that last summer. Yeah. There was an element of that. However, with every country going on the red list, with every bit of sort of like bad bit of news that relates to travel being propagated, confidence does take a hit. And it's been a long time since I've been on a packed aircraft. And we're talking about £10 flights, £50 return flights.
I think just to put a bit of this in context, we are actually in Spain and we're on a volunteer programme. And everybody on the volunteer programme lives in Spain full time. And we've all had to do an antigen test to allow ourselves to go on the programme. You have flown from the UK, so you are actually a celebrity on our course because nobody expected anybody to be here outside of Spain. So I'm sure the first time you started speaking to all the other volunteers, oh my God, you come from England. I mean, you are a celebrity on this course.
How you feel shocked that someone's come from England, I feel shocked that people ask me that question.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? We're both looking at the same situation from two different viewpoints. This is the thing. We thought, to the end of the tunnel with the COVID, and we were thinking, okay, Christmas is coming up. We can all sort of, relax and get back to our normal plans. And then the Omicron, and it's like, well, actually, no, it's all a different ball game again.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
what do we think is going to happen with the airline industry? I mean, when we were seeing the pictures of like Heathrow Airport jam-packed with aircraft just parked, Gatwick, Stansted, all the major UK airports just all brought to a grinding halt. The terminals were empty, people were laid off. I've never seen anything in my lifetime like this.
No.
And it's going to take a long time to get back to where we were. And I'm just wondering, with the cheap fares, because basically the airlines just want bums on seats at the moment. The summer holiday period, we sort of thought, yeah, people are deciding they've had enough, they're going to take their 2-week holiday. And it's been a bit, it was busy. People were saying, yeah, things are back to normal. Certain countries saying, yeah, you have to show a COVID passport to get into a restaurant or somewhere. I think we've got a long way to go yet.
We have got a long way to go. No one has a crystal ball.
No.
COVID will likely be with us for years. Most people are double vaccinated around Europe and or recovered from COVID. So arguably we're in one of the best situations we've ever been within Europe of protection against COVID. However, Christmas is around the corner and that's been put on ice to a degree. And so this is just a reality. However, having said that, you can only play the hand you're dealt. And if there is a window, we should take it. We should take the opportunities, stay abreast of news, of developments, try and play safe as best you can. And I haven't been caught out yet. I haven't even been close to being caught out yet. And I've only had, in the last year, very streamlined experiences going through airports and with airlines. COVID test, certainly an added expense. However, people shouldn't be disheartened because you can turn anything to your advantage. So where there is a will, there's a way. And I've got a friend who's in northern Kurdistan right now. And he's unvaccinated. So if he can get there, well, if people want it, they can do it. And it really isn't all as bad as what they may think. Mm. So I would say live immediately. Take advantage of the cheap fares. And going back to your point about the airlines, usually that's a sign of desperation. They're trying to get bums on seats, as you say. We'll probably lose one or two before this is all over. One or two smaller ones have already gone over. More local airports are probably going to be the ones to suffer the most. However, travel isn't all about flying. Some people have reservations to fly, and that's their choice, and that's perfectly fine. However, there are other options available to everyone, and some people just seem to be very sort of isolated, insular. That we've got into bad habits. Not everyone, by all means. I actually found during lockdown, a lot of people actually explored their local areas more, places where they may have lived for years and hadn't explored. They used that as an opportunity to, you could say, travel the local area. The paths less travelled. Oh, I wonder what's down the bottom of the hill there. And I'm talking for myself.
Yeah. That is a very valid point, because during the pandemic we were seeing, particularly in the UK, the amount of people who were doing staycations, campsites, caravan parks, mobile home parks, that sort of thing, absolutely went crazy. And they, interviewing these owners on TV, our bookings have gone up like 6,000%, and you're not going to be able to stay here for about the next year. We've got bookings in. So I think it's really boosted the tourist industry in your local country or maybe in your local vicinity, and people are looking at staycations. Whether that will be sustained after the pandemic and people think, well, it's less stressful, I don't have to worry about vaccinations, passports, airports, security, just chuck everything in the car and go to somewhere locally. Whether that will be sustained, I don't know.
Cornwall's a prime example of
Yeah.
that. It's more expensive to spend a week in Cornwall than it is almost anywhere else in Europe. Prices have shot up because of the staycations, as you say. However, if people think that it's not without stress, they're wrong, because it certainly is not stress-free. I mean, the traffic, the bookings, the prices. From my recollections and from what I can figure out, it's easier and cheaper for me to come here than to go to Cornwall in peak season. So it depends what you like. There's areas around the globe in Europe right now where, because of the lack of footfall, nature has been able to regenerate somewhat. Improvements have been able to be made in infrastructure. There are less people around. And for some people listening, they may all sound like positive things. They do to me. So with a bit of research, with maybe perhaps a little bit of bravery, a bit of courage, there are trips of a lifetime to be had in this period. So the fact that we can travel is good enough reason for why we should travel. Because if we can, we can. When we can't, we can't.
That's very true. So, William, have you got a list of travel coming up? Have you got some places that you've already got booked?
No. And that's pretty much how I roll, actually.
Okay, so you leave it to the last minute to travel?
Yes, it helps with COVID. It helps with preparation. If I leave it last minute, then it's not likely it's going to be cancelled. Of course, I completely empathise with listeners where they may need to plan further in ahead. I haven't got solutions to everyone's problems. I just want people to understand that they should not necessarily cower in the face of the pandemic. It's not a particularly irresponsible thing to do, I would say, travel, because the new variant COVID is everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. So it's spreading within communities with or without travel. Of course, travel is what makes it spread. I mean, I've had a ridiculous amount of COVID tests, and I will take a booster jab as soon as it's offered. So if the chance and I don't necessarily put anyone at any undue risk. I follow restrictions. However, I choose the best options available to myself. I do actually, having said that, I do have one trip planned. It's like winter sports in February. But that's through an organisation, so that's all taken care of. I don't have to do any thinking or planning of that, and that's all insured, if you like. However, personal trips such as the one I'm on now, I live in the present, and that allows me more autonomy and flexibility to try and get things right and not caught out.
I mean, I think one of the things I personally remember seeing on the TV when the pandemic started was the cruise ship full of passengers and a huge number of people trying to get into a port in a country that would take these people. And they were basically just sailing around because nobody would take them. And I think maybe a lot of people are thinking, okay, there's some amazing cruise deals out there, and trust me, there are. But they're thinking, okay, well, I don't actually want to be on a ship that if there is another outbreak somewhere, I'm sailing around on the ship, confined to my cabin, and no country will take us. I think a lot of people are still remembering seeing those sort of stories on the TV. So it's not all about flying. Cruise ships, some fantastic deals at the moment as well.
Absolutely, there are. The global community as a whole has got a much better understanding of COVID and how we can mitigate a situation like that happening again. However, if you're worried about traveling during the pandemic and getting called out, I would say that's a perfectly natural question. But let's find solutions to these problems, because there are several. The goalposts do change. You just need to keep abreast of it. So instead of listening to scaremongering, I just look at the objective facts. It's almost like looking at the stock market. You know, where are the numbers going up? Where are they coming down?
Don't get too emotionally attached to it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be, you don't have to reinvent the wheel with this. And we can start where you are, like people were at the beginning of the pandemic. But with climate change, with Brexit, with COVID, becoming more complicated, and some of the more remote and beautiful areas of the planet, they're not always going to necessarily be there in the conditions that they are now. So I would say that this has accelerated the need for experiences, traveling, personal experiences. I mean, I understand the irony is the more people travel, the more that climate change perhaps is accelerated. However, like I said, it's not for me. I'm not talking about getting on a plane or a cruise trip. I'm talking more holistically here. The more like the philosophy behind why we travel, why we should travel. And that is, it's good for people. It's good to actually, the reality on the ground is often far removed from our perceived prejudices. And that's none more so than what we've been fed in regards to COVID, the pandemic. Most people actually, almost everyone I meet is pretty damn relaxed about it. You know, we know the game. Everything's voluntary. We volunteered to come here. There's a risk, but there's nothing to say that you wouldn't get it anyway. And let's face facts. If you're double vaccinated, you maintain a healthy lifestyle, then there's a high chance that you'll shake it off. I accept the risks, but then you don't even if you don't want to put yourself at undue, someone would describe as undue risk, there are ways around it. We just need to be a bit more creative here, a little bit of courage, think a bit laterally, and turn it to our advantage. It can be an exciting time to go and travel and meet people.
So just before we finish then, William, your last bit of advice or your last thoughts on the subject of travelling during a pandemic?
Understand the rules, play by the rules, and win the game.
Can't say any fairer than that though, can we? So William, thank you so much for being a guest on All About You podcast.
It was a pleasure coming on, and I wish you all the best with it.
Lovely, thank you very much. I hope you have enjoyed the conversation. Don't forget, if you have a story you would like to tell, please get in touch. My email address is allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com, and thank you for listening.